people that can actually organize deeply, not widely. So what we have, beginning with Flatiron maybe, how many people do we have from that area?
We have, well, 3, because it's Chelsea, Flatiron. So we're 3.
3. Okay, what are the other areas?
I'm going to Chelsea.
Tribeca,
1. There's only one for that.
okay.
I would say well, 3 down.
She's east side downtown.
So east side, what, east side, west side, or you split that up? Just downtown, okay. How many do you have upper west side? That seemed to be a biggie. 6 people upper west side.
Yeah, we'll come Washington.
Okay, now we're gonna come back around, and we're gonna really hold this in mind. We're gonna ask how difficult would it be to walk from one area to another? We're gonna actually chunk it down to walking distance, upper west side, walking distance, lower east side, walking distance, whatever the other, what are you guys over here?
Upper east side.
Upper east side, exactly. So upper east side, you're 2. Upper west side, you're 6. Downtown,
We're 7.
7 downtown,
East and west.
7 east and west. Okay. Am I good? We got that? Is that on paper someplace?
Yeah.
Please, good. Brooklyn, how'd we do?
We're still on.
You're drawing the map of Brooklyn? Okay.
And if you're trying to understand what the idea is, you got closer to it.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the idea right now is we're not worrying about the transition process. We're just trying, let me put it this way. The idea that we're looking toward is, if I'm standing in Bedford-Stuyvesant, I want to know how resilient Bedford-Stuyvesant is right now. If in fact there was interruption of the trucks or the tunnels were down, the bridges, what have you, weather, storm, grid, whatever, how long could I do really well in Bedford-Stuyvesant where I am? Then moving in walking distance, which is why I'm trying to get to this now, in walking distance, what would I find that would support me from Bedford-Stuyvesant, in a concentric circle around me in Bedford-Stuyvesant? In bicycling distance, what would I find that would support me and keep me resilient? In public transportation district, and then in a 100-mile radius. So let's not overthink this right now. All we're doing is trying to figure out how many of you in your circle can walk to each other without any problem, so that we can start thinking about what exists there and begin using the material. So, how many people Bedford-Stuyvesant? 3. You're Bedford-Stuyvesant too, right?
That size is the size of Boston.
That size is like
That size is the size of Boston.
That's true, but I would
Right,
still love
but
to
we
know
need
if
to
someone
start
else-
someplace.
I love the other side.
We have 3, and then we're also taking Williamsburg too.
Bedford-Stuyvesant and Williamsburg, Park Slope. 2 from Park Slope. Where's everybody else?
Flatbush, Diker Heights.
No, I'm Brighton Beach.
Red Diker Heights.
Diker Heights.
She's on the floor, she's drawing it now. Brighton Beach here, Brownsville, Lefferts, which I can.
Lefferts?
Lefferts,
I'm
Prospect
gonna-
and Stars, right?
Crown Heights.
Crown Heights.
All over the place.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is a very, and Queens, you guys are easy, right? You're 4 here. We have Far Rockaway, Sunnyside, Forest Hills, and Woodside. Woodside. Can any of you, you can't walk to Far Rockaway, can any of you walk to each other?
Yeah, we walk to each other.
You can.
We walk to each other.
Okay. Now here we have New Jersey and Philadelphia and Westchester County.
I can walk.
So Dobbs Ferry and Irvington can walk to each other. Long Island can walk to each other. The three of you, kind of.
Very far.
Very, very far. Okay. And who else do we have here? We have Bronx. 3 Bronx,
Yeah,
and then Jersey City and Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Okay.
that'd be a really long walk.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the next task is to figure out what. Let's look at the transition neighborhood piece next. Let's look at your pamphlet here. You're going to begin speaking to the people that live closest to you, and you're going to look at the prequel. Actually, the first 2 pages of this, as I mentioned, there are 4, the way this works is that we begin to think about who in our neighborhood, which is why we're trying to connect you with a face that's from somewhere near your neighborhood, who in your neighborhood is a person who knows an awful lot of people. Because we're going to try and coalesce groups of people that can move through these 12 chapters, the prequel, which is how you get organized, these 12 chapters that have to deal with transition types of topics, how we are resilient with the best food. There are 2 chapters on food. We all deserve the best food, quality awareness. The long arc of interconnected food resilience is about, okay, if we really need to think about New York in difficulty, where would we store food? Where would we grow food? That's the longer arc of the food question. The first one is what's there now? Recycling, compost, zero waste, water conservation, everything from buying a little tiny life straw that will keep your water, give you gallons of purified water all the time, to rain barrels and runoff and rooftop gardens and all of those types of drainage systems. That chapter deals with all of that. Staying in the loop. Good evening. Come on in. Who can tell me how New York during 9/11 stayed in contact? Stayed communicated. Wendy? Bicycle. Bicycle.
Radio.
What radio?
Well, I know during Sandy, NPR, I listened to all the time.
Radio was essential when the police and fire emergency people could not get through because everything was jammed. Do you know who stood in?
Ham radio.
Ham radio. 500 ham radios kept New York, ham radio operators kept New York operative during 9/11. And people were getting messages, the police and fire were connected. So transition looks at powered down, carbon neutral, simple, sometimes old technologies that we should never have gotten rid of in the first place, like ham radio, and neighbor-to-neighbor communication, which is why you're sitting in your neighborhood. We have multi-layered tiers of communications processes that will withstand grid down, that will withstand lots of, will keep us all connected regardless of what. In blue sky when nothing's happening, or when there is a difficult situation. So that's what the communications piece is about. The Metro can-do resilient response spirit, and they're chapter 7 and 8, chapter 7 and 8. That is how is New York going to, if you're not connected anymore, it's very warm here. If you're not connected anymore if trucks are interrupted, for example, how you, right where you are, can sustain yourselves. That is chapter 7. Chapter 8 is that 100-mile radius piece. We'd like you to take vacations, perhaps not in the Hamptons, but in the lower and upper Hudson Valley. So you get to know who's growing your food, so that you actually come and pick your food on a weekend. You hang out with the farmers up where I live. So it's that kind of forward thinking about knowing, so your food stops coming from 1,500 miles, your food stops coming from 3,000 miles, you start growing it on your roof and on your balcony and in your backyard and in rooftop greenhouses and in the abandoned buildings where we can have closed loop food systems with breweries and bakeries and all those kinds of things that use the waste of one industry, food industry, to do another. We build that out. And then if we build out the potential of every single neighborhood, if we can vision that and make that happen, and once we've built that out, then we connect you concentric ring by concentric ring by concentric ring to the lower Hudson Valley and the mid Hudson Valley and Lancaster County in Pennsylvania and the Garden State, the southern part of the Garden State. So New York City is connected. So that's what that chapter number 8 is about. The alternative energy alternatives piece is clear. I'm just going to keep opening this a little bit off and on so we get some air. Transportation is clear. Consumption and money has to do with new economy types of ideas. It has to do with shareable economy, gift economy, time banks, local currencies, the types sharing and a new way of interchanging and exchanging goods. That's what that has to do with that. And what we consume, thinking consciously and mindfully about what we consume and what that does to the planet. That's what the chapter 11 is about. And then by the time, what you're doing is, every time you meet with people who are going to take one of these chapters, you're going to find a place, in the prequel you'll find a place where you're going to hang out, where you're going to meet, where you're, maybe a diner, maybe somebody's apartment, maybe someplace in the neighborhood. You're going to come together and you're going to do an investigation of your neighborhood together. You're going to figure out what is already hidden in my neighborhood, what resources are there, hidden in plain sight, that I didn't even know about. The community gardens that are already there. Somebody has a rooftop garden. Somebody knows a lot about planters and container gardening. What are the resources that are already there? And then in each chapter you go out, you will have resources where you can interview people, you can talk to people in your neighborhood, and then you come back with your friends again to explore the next chapter. We found out that all of this stuff existed on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. We didn't even know it was there. And then you record that, you go on to the next chapter. So what you're doing is asset mapping for your neighborhood. You're finding, as I said, what is hidden in plain sight. And then by the time you get, and also what is not there, which is the gap analysis. So by the time you get to chapter 12, you'll know what should be there. If all of Park Slope could feed it, all of Park Slope could be fed, what should be there, what is there, what the gap is, and then you begin to think about strategies of how to get what you need there. And if you can't get what you need there, how to connect yourself to other neighborhoods or walking, biking, public transportation, Lower Hudson Valley, those places where you can get that need met. So that's really what Transition Neighborhoods is about. It is making certain that you are always connected to other people that will help you meet your basic needs, come what may, come whatever down the pike, in whatever form it takes. And I'm going to be quiet now and ask you to give me some idea of what your questions are, before we go into more group work. What are your questions about this, the how-to? Thoughts, challenges? Yes. Catherine.
Clean water would be the most essential to start with, to have sources of clean water on a short-term basis and a long-term basis. So would we actually like to start collecting rainwater and that kind of thing? Eventually make plans for us to do that ourselves, if need be?
Every neighborhood is going to have a different situation. There may be rooftop gardens already. There may be people with rain barrels already. If in fact you can't do that in your neighborhood, that's why I talk about everything from, everybody know what a life straw is?
Yes.
No.
So who said yes? Anne.
It's a project that was developed by an international NGO to enable people in places where there's a lack of clean drinkable water. They developed a straw that has a filtration system built in it so that people could basically sort of lean over the side of their boat or whatever and drink from water that was extremely impure, and be able to sustain themselves on that.
Exactly. Everybody heard that? Yeah. So, and it costs almost nothing. You can buy it online. So what I'm saying is we're chunking it down to the smallest thing that you can do to make certain if you do not have clean water at any point in time, you have a life straw. Up to rain barrels, up to rooftop gardens and the entire drainage process that happens there, to backyard gardens, what you can do in a backyard if you have a backyard, etc. So each one of these chapters, as you move through it with your neighbors, will give you the resources you can explore in your neighborhood. Some of them, you investigate more, and you figure out what's not there, and water would be a major thing. You are which neighborhood?
Tribeca, Lower Manhattan.
Tribeca. There are neighborhoods that have configurations that make it easier or less easy to do certain things. That's why it's really specific. We're trying to be really specific to the blocks, the 4 or 5 blocks where you live, what's there. So it's going to be different for every neighborhood. But the idea, Janet and Dan and Maris, who's not here, the people that are working in the hub, their job is to let everyone from all of the different neighborhoods share best practices. So as you're working in your own neighborhoods on this, you know, Tribeca knows what Williamsburg is doing and what Forest Hills is doing. So that you're bouncing ideas off of each other even as you're doing this process. Thoughts? Yes.
Just trying to understand how this works. So like this is the first meeting of this transition group, is this it? And then you work through each step? Or how does?
Actually, this has been the third time we've met
Oh,
at the
okay.
meeting house, and every
Okay.
time we meet, more people come in, so we kind of
Okay.
repeat it over again.
Okay.
But what we're going to start the process as a group now. I do want to hear more observations and more thoughts. But to answer your question, we're going to work with the second page, which is the prequel, and you're going to start exploring your neighborhood culture. Who's there? Who do you see walking around? Glenn, for example, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, last time we met, was saying that there's a couple that runs a restaurant that knows everybody there. And that's where you put your announcements, and that's where you connect with people. That's maybe where the small group would begin to meet. Because there are mavens in a neighborhood that know people. So that's what we're going to begin the process now of maybe working in threes or twos, however many people are in your neighborhood, to start scoping out the culture of your neighborhood to begin that process. But we're doing that here. Hopefully it will continue in your neighborhood, and I will send around this sheet here. If you want to actually begin a transition neighborhood in your neighborhood, please tell us. Even if you told us last time, sign this thing again so that we know we can help you begin transitioning and give you ideas of who you might reach out to in your neighborhood so you can begin the process. This is kind of walking you through the first part of it tonight, but you really take this home and go for it yourself. With help, with Dan and Janet and the other folks, yes. Yes, and then MJ after that. Your name, first name?
Nancy.
Nancy.
So, this sounds very appealing and very interesting. My experience in my neighborhood is that blocks are meaningful entities. And there are a lot of people who live on a given block. And there are a lot of block associations and a lot of block parties. And so those would seem to me to be the natural group, not people living in the neighborhood that may not really have as easy a connection. I could probably send out an email and get 10 people to come to a meeting on my block because they're used to doing this. And say, this is interesting stuff, let's talk about it. And I think that may be true in many places.
That's our hope.
Yeah, that the block, because you see people and you really can help each other much more easily if you live so close to each other. And also big apartment houses. Big apartment houses, very often, people really know each other, especially if you've had little kids. I mean, everybody knows each other's kids as they grow up. And so all those kinds of contacts make the building of community relatively easy in the city. That's my
Ditto that.
opinion.
Ditto that. Actually, last time we were here, the example I was giving was Morningside Gardens in Morningside Heights on the Upper West Side. 6 buildings, which are co-op, that had been organizing. They organized people for the People's Climate March. They've actually. The association in the buildings are longtime union organizers anyway, just lends themselves totally to that. That's a total advantage New York has. Like I said, Montreal, I asked the exact same question last night. Do you guys have block associations or some kind of breakdown of organizing units in Montreal? Nope. So New York has an infrastructure already that can be reanimated. Absolutely, Nancy. MJ.
Well, I was just going to comment on that, and the whole idea is about finding your own kind of ecosystem where you are. And regarding water, if you're in Tucson, Arizona, your water challenges are going to be very different than Tribeca. And it could be a building, but also there are some places and communities that gather around the swimming pool. Like a community, a sense of knowing people and a sense of friendship develops around soccer teams or whatever. And so it's really about identifying what whether there are pre-built webbings within the community and how to utilize them.
Absolutely. I also wanted to just introduce MJ Wilson and Howard Bailey and Dan. What we mentioned, the Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub, that is that group of 7 states of 21 people. MJ is one of the representatives from New York, and Howard Bailey is one of the Map Council people from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So, and they just come and support us wherever we are. So it's very nice to. I just want to recognize you guys. Yes, Charlotte?
Yeah, Charlotte, I was just going to add, I'm sure this has been thought of, but I mean, similar to what everyone's saying, there are so many mommy groups, parent
groups
groups that are just incredibly tight and incredibly strong. I know the one in Williamsburg is several thousand deep, and people are very responsive.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm putting the flip chart paper in the middle,
Yeah.
so that we're getting all of this good juicy information down, the block associations, the mommy groups, etc. We'll give you some more, make certain that we're getting this and can reflect it back to you once we collect all of this, the resources that we already know. Yes, Colleen.
I'm really new to my neighborhood. I just moved there about a month and a half ago. But I do know people who can organize. So I don't know how helpful or useful I'm going to be tonight, but I know if they were able to be here, they would be like 10 times more helpful.
Knowing people who know people, that's the bottom line. Yes. Catherine and then Ann.
Okay, another place is the schools. I know my daughter went to school in my neighborhood, I was active in the PTA, and they were beautifully organized, doing 9/11, because I lived down in that neighborhood. So the schools is a good potential, and it also can provide a good meeting place, schools.
Okay, again, this is Tribeca. That may not be the case in Far Rockaway, may not be the case in Forest Hills. That's why the piece of paper is right in front of you. We want to make sure that we have neighborhood by neighborhood, the resources you can come up bada bing right now. And sir, you just walked in, what neighborhood are you from?
Chelsea.
Chelsea, so you're right in the right place. Join the circle. What is your first name? Mark. Welcome. Yes.
Come on over.
Yes.
I have a certain problem with the process in terms of the impracticality, because I'm not quite certain the reason for doing the resiliency. Since you brought up 9/11, I'm assuming that you want to set up resiliency in the event of a disaster of some kind, as opposed to just being able to get community groups working together on a general basis. And my problem is that I've lived through Irene, I've lived through Sandy, and a lot of us have more than one neighborhood that we have to be responsible in, namely where we work, which is an entirely different neighborhood with an entirely different set of problems. And I will have to get from the west side to South Street Seaport, for example, which I did do right after Sandy. Some of us even have 3 neighborhoods. We could be caught upstate in a 3rd home, where a lot of my friends have third-party houses. So that's a 3rd neighborhood that we have to be responsible about. It all depends on the situation that happens and the kind of disaster and the reason for doing this.
You have about 4 points in there, to which I will respond. The transition movement is one big, massive social experiment. We do not have all of the answers, and we're not positing anything like that. And I should back up and say that this is it's modeled, I said briefly that it's modeled on permaculture, was born therefrom, which means that Louis and Ted and Wendy and Frank, everybody is, just like in a living system, every organism is important. Your opinions, your gifts, your talents, what you bring to the table is important. It morphs and it moves and it transforms, and every neighborhood will contribute to what New York transition will look like. We're losing you?
I have to leave her.
Oh, that's right, you did tell me that. Okay.
I didn't, but I'm telling you now. I like to work with a group.
Could you please put your name on there, so we know that you want to join a neighborhood? Okay. Thank you. It's Tom, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So the idea is that it is a constantly changing, shifting process. We will give you chapters that you can work with. That's why it's a beta test. but it is to New York, it is to the Upper West Side, it is to Queens to actually help us write it. And what you're saying here will be folded right into the process. That's the first thing. The second thing is, this is not about disasters. This is about, and that's why we launched it after the climate march on the 23rd of September. It is about the fact that the earth is constantly changing. The earth is transforming. We're looking at economic contraction. We know the disparity between, thank you very much, Sean. See you soon, hopefully. Okay? We know for a fact, we know the state of our economy. We know the food banks are over, the food banks and the soup kitchens. We know the share economy, the gift economy is so paramount now because people are in dire straits. It is about economic contraction. It is also about climate change. Irrespective if there's some disaster yesterday or tomorrow or 2 years from now, the climate is shifting. And we know that water is rising. And just like we're transitioning with Amersfoort, Netherlands, New York is going to learn how to deal with that. There is no such thing. That's why it's called resilient response instead of emergency preparedness. Because we know, as Richard Heinberg would say, we are in for one big, long emergency. So why call it an emergency? We'll just live in a heightened state of awareness, a heightened state of mindfulness. And we will do it by holding arms together. And we will get through the eye of the needle successfully, together. So it's not about disaster. It is about resilience regardless of what comes down the pike, because we know each other and we know our neighborhoods and we're going deep into our geography. Now we can't tell where we're going to be when something hits because we're really not concerned about something hits, because that's not the focal point. But if you are in the Upper West Side and you happen to be working in the Flatiron that day, you will know Janet, and you will know Mark, and you will know Frank, because you've participated in transition neighborhoods. So if you're not in the at 95th Street when something hits, you'll know Janet. Is that a doorbell or a fire alarm?
Something hit.
Just want to be sure. Just want to be sure. You will know if you happen to be in Bedford-Stuyvesant when something hits, you'll know Chris and Glenn. If you have, it's that kind of. That's why we're all sitting here. So the regard, and if you happen to be upstate, you'll know me. Okay. So that's another answer to your question. So let us, Anna.
There's something that I'm thinking as we have these conversations, and I think that what Nancy says is on my mind as I try to imagine organizing people that are not as geographically connected. But then when I think back to Hurricane Sandy, neighborhoods that were quite far from me, the word was getting around as to who needed what. We knew that the trouble areas where there were large numbers of people who were without power and who needed food, we knew that it was Red Hook, we knew that it was the Rockaways. We had a sense of what was happening where, even if it was pretty geographically removed. I learned pretty quickly that there was almost more food than was necessary going to Red Hook, but that there was more trouble getting out to the Rockaways because of the distance. So when emergencies strike, we do it. We find a way to get that information out there. When there was the blackout in 2003, I was in the East Village when it happened. How did I get home? I stayed overnight at a friend's house, walked over the Williamsburg Bridge the next day, and found a bus that would go all the way down Nostrand Avenue to get me way out where I lived. Like, we find a way to make these geographic distances smaller when there's an emergency or a disaster, and I think that one of the things that's a challenge, but is the challenge for this project, is to figure out how to take the things that are happening already, like the listservs where people are already communicating, the very small geographic networks where people are having their block parties or organizing at their community garden or whatever, and how to start thinking about being more aware of what other people are doing. Like I heard there were people out in the Rockaways that had solar panels, and then that always stays in my mind. It's like, oh, there are people in New York City who have solar panels. Maybe if someone else ever needed them, there would be, to find a way to make that more part of our everyday instead of something that we just have to throw together hurriedly when disasters.
That is the critical piece, Anne. We are doing this proactively, ahead of time, knowing that the dial is going to turn up. So by the time whatever happens, we are there. We know each other. We have mapped the neighborhoods. We know what the resources are. We know what the scaffolding is in a neighborhood that we can immediately activate. That is the point. So I'm going to ask you, and again, when you write things on these pieces of paper here about your neighborhoods, about the mommy group, about the block associations, the hub, the 15th Street Meeting House is in fact the New York Transition Hub, if you want to think of a geographic space, manned by people, peopled by people, who will get your information amalgamated, get it out to you, so all these neighborhoods know what's happening. So it's important that what you're saying end up on that paper. So let us begin with the prequel. If you would pull that out. Could you please make note of exactly what Nancy and Charlotte are talking about? What are the existing mavens and networks in your neighborhood? And do it with the people that are closest to you. So it's not the whole group doing it together. Flatiron do it together, Upper West Side do it together, Upper East Side do it together, etc. So that we have a listing of what's already there. Who are the mavens? Go for it, guys.
We're writing this list where?
You're writing on the